So if you travel 350 miles due east of where we are right now, right before you bump up against the Idaho border, you will land in Wallowa County. And for those of you who haven't been to Wallowa County, this is a place with a deep gorge that makes up one side of it, that shoots up to these incredible snow-capped mountains, vast prairies, timbered rangeland. It's about 2 million acres, and in that 2 million acres live roughly 7,000 people. Also in that 2 million acres live roughly 70,000 head of cattle. And this is the place where I spent the first 17 years of my life and the last 10. When I left Wallowa County, I left believing that what we were doing there, everything about it was right. And when I came back, I feared that everything we were doing was wrong. I grew up a pretty typical ranch kid. I changed sprinkler pipe, I rode horses, and I knew that the cows always came first, even on Christmas and my birthday. And when I graduated from high school, I was the top 5% of my class. And because there were 19 of us. And I left for Stanford thinking of ranching as an honorable life where you're connected to the land, the community, and you're raising food for people. And when I got there, I learned very quickly that my new friends did not share my perspective on ranching. I learned that cattle were the source of untold environmental ills, of pollution. Ranchers didn't care about their animals. There was abuse, neglect. I learned a lot really quickly, and all of this from people who hadn't been within 20 feet of a cow in their life. And I wondered where such strong opinions about ranching came from. Until the first time that I drove between the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And I passed the Harris Ranch feedlot. It was the first time that I had ever experienced the other side of the cattle industry and seen where the cattle went when they left our ranch. And of course, I smelled it long, long before I saw it. And in that couple mile stretch of freeway, I saw more cattle than I had ever seen in all of my years of ranching prior to that point combined. And so that experience and the understanding perspective of the people that I was hanging out with started me on this path to decouple the ranching that I had grown up experiencing from the feedlot side that I was learning about. And I was really fortunate to have the guidance of a professor who was an Iowa farm boy turned into his academic career was focused on solving some of the biggest challenges in feeding a growing world population. And he assured me that the ability for ruminant animals to turn grass and the cellulose in grass into protein that could be eaten by humans was actually a critical piece of feeding a growing population. And in fact, there were many cultures and many countries in the world that still had robust systems that did this. And he also assured me that while cattle grazing had caused environmental problems, that it didn't have to be, meat didn't have to be raised in a way that damaged the environment. So this was I began searching all over the place to try to find some of these models and figure out how some of these systems existed. And I began my policy career in Washington, D.C. with this backdrop in my head of wanting to explore these systems. A few years later, I was between jobs, and I wanted to spend some time on the family cattle ranch, and so I came home for a couple months stint. And during that time, very early on in fact, I realized with a sort of certainty that terrified me that I could go all over the world searching for these systems and learning, or I could face the one that was right there in front of me. And in addition to the reality of what our family ranch could become, and my experience having just moved from Southern California, and understanding how much people's interest in healthy and sustainable food was growing, combined with the fact that our 100-year-old family ranch was hanging on by a thread, sort of put me on a very clear path forward. And I decided to stay and raise grass-fed beef, having never even tried it. I met my husband, and we have embarked on a path that has turned out to be far more powerful than the idea of dispelling a few negative myths about ranching. We have come to understand that growing good, healthy, sustainable food isn't just about not doing any harm. It can be about addressing some of our greatest challenges. And those challenges include climate change, desertification, antibiotic resistance, obesity. And we learned part of this through a practice called holistic management. And through holistic management, we came to understand the cycles of grasslands and the cycles of animals as something that can be respected and built upon. And in doing that, you can actually put carbon back into the soil. You can reverse some of the effects of environmental degradation. And the byproduct of these type of restorative agricultural systems is healthy, nutrient-rich, and very flavorful food. So these amazing, powerful ideas that we started experiencing on the ground and that we started learning about were great, and they did absolutely nothing to prepare us to actually be in business. And on top of that, we went into business with this idea that we were going to sell grass-fed beef, and we did it with a rancher mentality and a rancher background. And there are a couple key things about ranchers' mentalities that really work against you when you're trying to start a small business on a shoestring. The first of those is that ranchers, by their nature, very much emphasize quality of life over money. And that's great until you're trying to control your cash flow. The second piece of the rancher mentality is this idea that when it comes to animals, when you're working with animals, dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, you're not doing cost-benefit analysis. If an animal has a problem or an issue, you're dealing with it. And so it puts you in this constant mindset of dealing with what's urgent rather than what's important. And still, through these, we continue to learn these things, and through this, we still sort of forged on, and we began our grass-fed beef business. For the first 5 years, we focused on the production side. We raised animals, we learned about our grazing management systems, we learned about quality and meat, and we sold our animals through something called the cow share program. So we were able to sell live animals to customers who wanted to fill their freezer with beef, which was great. And we built up to several hundred families in Portland. We did deliveries several times a year. And after 5 years of starting to really feel like we were getting the hang of the production side, we also faced the reality that we weren't going to change our food system. We weren't going to change the way that people thought about meat. And we weren't going to support our local community by bringing large streams of revenue back that had a values vision attached to it through, sorry, I just got distracted by how quickly I need to finish up this talk. So I'm going to think about which part to skip. So we started into our wholesale market. We built our wholesale market with the support of some of these amazing customers that you guys have heard of. And OHSU was one of our first big customers. Dick's Kitchen, Laughing Planet, Higgins, Beast, Vitali Paley. We have some incredible supporters in this community that have helped us grow our brand. The challenges in what we're trying to do have to do with our three crazy ideas. The first one is that quality in beef is not about fat and tenderness. This is something that we have been taught forever. And I'm here to tell you that it's not true. And just like we experienced in wine and in coffee and all sorts of other foods, I predict that there will be a pretty significant revolution, and we will come to think of quality in meat as flavor first and fat and tenderness second. The other crazy idea, it has to do with our supply chain, which didn't exist. All of the profitability in the beef industry is tied up in vertical integration and efficiency. And so we had to start out from scratch. The infrastructure that supported small-scale agriculture was gone. And we began doing that by working with Cisco and trying to take advantage of their efficiencies as our distributor. And like so many people know, when you are a values-based business, partnering with somebody that doesn't share your values is not the best thing to do. And so now we work with Beeline, a bicycle delivery company, to do most of our deliveries, and the rest we do ourselves. And the third crazy idea is that beef is a seasonal product. We have a fresh season and a frozen season. So I'm going to wrap up by telling you that so we were sitting around the fire at my house earlier this week talking about the big ideas that we've learned from being in small business. And the first big idea is that the big idea is not brilliant. It's the implementation of the idea that is brilliant and hard. Having some skin in the game is critical to not giving up. And having money early on means that that's money that you can spend poorly. So we're very glad that we weren't well capitalized early on. And at this point in our conversation around the fire outside of my house, my 9-year-old interjected, and he's like, hey, you know what? I'm part of this business too, and I've learned some things too. And we looked at him, and he said, do not go in the pen with the boar. Which we decided was actually the most practical advice. Thank you.